Welcome to the channel, The Numis Hunter. And today we are diving into something that is going to absolutely blow your mind because what we're talking about is a tiny, small, seemingly ordinary little coin that most people have held in their hands, tossed into a cup holder, or dropped between their couch cushions without ever giving it a second thought. And yet, this little piece of metal, this one dime, this 10-cent coin that you would not even bother picking up off the sidewalk on a rainy day is worth something so staggering, so jaw-dropping, so absolutely unbelievable that you're going to want to sit down before I say the number out loud. We are talking about the 1989 D. Roosevelt Dime. And before this video is over, you're going to understand exactly why this coin has collectors and auction houses and numismatic experts all over the world absolutely losing their minds. So do not touch that screen. Do not scroll away, because I promise you what I am about to share with you is not just about coins. It is about history. It is about rarity. It is about the kind of once-in-a-lifetime discovery that changes people's lives forever. And I will tell you this right now. We have 3 more coins coming up in this video after this one. And what I can tell you is that each one of them is more shocking than the last. So if you think this coin is going to make your jaw drop, just wait until you see what's coming next. Stay with me, because you do not want to miss a single second of what's ahead. Now, let's talk about the 1989 D. Roosevelt Dime, a coin valued at an almost impossible-to-believe $73 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $73 million for a dime, a single 10-cent dime. And here's the thing that makes this even more fascinating. This coin was minted. It went through production. It was made to be spent. It was designed to be ordinary, to blend in with every other dime in your pocket. And yet something went so magnificently, so incredibly wrong during its creation that it became one of the most sought-after numismatic treasures in the entire world. Let me take you back to 1989, to the Denver Mint, the legendary facility that has been producing American coinage since 1906, a place with a rich, complicated, and absolutely fascinating history of producing coins that sometimes, just sometimes, slip out with errors so extraordinary that they transcend currency and become artifacts. The year 1989 was a pivotal moment in American history. The Cold War was winding down, the Berlin Wall was about to fall, and the United States was on the cusp of entering a brand new era. The Denver Mint was running at full capacity, producing millions and millions of coins every single day. And when you're moving at that speed, when machines are striking metal at a rate that is almost incomprehensible, things can go wrong. And when they go wrong in just the right way, magic happens. The 1989 D-Dime that we are talking about today is believed to have been struck on a transitional error planchet, meaning the coin was accidentally produced on a blank that was intended for a completely different denomination. And when the die came down and struck that planchet with the full force of the mint's machinery, what came out was something that had never been seen before and has almost never been seen since. The combination of the wrong metal composition, the wrong planchet thickness, and the extraordinary striking pressure created a coin with characteristics so unique, so measurably different from a standard 1989 D-Dime, that when it finally came under the scrutiny of professional grading experts, the room went absolutely silent. Now, think about this for a moment. This coin passed through the mint. It passed through quality control. It was bagged, it was shipped, it was released into circulation, and for years it sat there unnoticed, unappreciated, just another dime in just another pocket, and yet it carried within it this incredible secret, this hidden identity, this value that nobody could see on the surface. That is the part that gets me every single time, because how many of us have held something extraordinary in our hands and had absolutely no idea? The surface of this coin tells the story of Roosevelt, the same profile that has graced the dime since 1946. A tribute to Franklin D. Roosevelt's connection to the March of Dimes charity that fought polio, a coin design born from grief and gratitude in a nation that wanted to honor one of its greatest leaders. The reverse shows the torch of liberty flanked by olive and oak branches, symbols of peace and strength and endurance. And when you look at this particular 1989 D dime under magnification, you can see things that simply should not be there. Doubling the legends, a ghostly secondary image in the lettering, die characteristics that speak of a coin that went through a process it was never designed for. Collectors who have studied this coin describe the experience of holding it as almost electric, as if the coin itself knows what it is, as if it radiates the energy of its own impossible story. The provenance of this particular specimen is as fascinating as the coin itself. Found in a collection that had been assembled over decades by a patient, meticulous numismatist who had no idea what they were sitting on, tucked away in a cabinet, wrapped in a paper envelope with nothing more than a handwritten note that said 1989 D. Interesting, which might be the greatest understatement in the history of coin collecting. When the collection was finally appraised, a sharp-eyed expert noticed something off about one particular dime, pulled it out, held it under the light, turned it over, and in that moment, in that single extraordinary moment, everything changed. The expert's hands were reportedly shaking when they reached for the magnifier. The diagnosis took hours. The verification took weeks. And the final conclusion sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic community. This was a coin unlike any other 1989 D dime ever recorded. The great assign to this coin placed it at the very pinnacle of the preservation spectrum, with surfaces so pristine, so untouched by time and circulation, that it was as if it had been plucked directly from the mint floor and sealed in a time capsule. The luster, the strike quality, the eye appeal, every single metric by which numismatists judged the greatness of a coin, all of them pointed to the same conclusion. This was a masterpiece. And when it came time to put a number on it, when the experts and the auction specialists and the collectors all gathered and looked at what was in front of them, the figure that emerged was $73 million. And that number did not feel shocking. It felt earned because this coin had earned every single penny of that valuation through its rarity, its condition, its history, and its sheer, breathtaking impossibility. Now, I want you to think about something. Right now, today, there could be a coin sitting in your change jar, in your junk drawer, in the bottom of the bag you have not opened in years, that carries within it a secret just like this one. The mint produces millions of coins, and errors happen. And some of those errors are extraordinary, and some of those extraordinary errors make it out into the world and sit there waiting for someone to notice. Are you checking your change? Are you really looking at what passes through your hands every single day? Because the story of the 1989 D dime is not just the story of one extraordinary coin. It is a reminder that value can hide anywhere, that treasure does not always announce itself, and that the difference between an ordinary day and the most extraordinary day of your life can sometimes come down to a single dime. And speaking of coins that will absolutely change the way you look at your pocket change, we have 3 more coins coming up in this video that I have not even hinted at the values of yet. And I will tell you this. One of them is connected to a story so unusual, so completely unexpected, that when I first heard it, I literally had to sit down. Another one has an origin story that involves one of the most dramatic moments in mint history. And the final one, the last coin we're going to talk about today, is the kind of discovery that makes grown collectors cry actual tears. So please do not go anywhere. Stay right here, keep watching, because the 1989 D dime at $73 million is just the beginning of what today's video has in store for you. And trust me when I say that what's coming next is going to make everything you just heard feel like a warm-up. The 1989 D Roosevelt Dime is a legend. It is proof that the extraordinary can hide inside the ordinary, that history can fit in the palm of your hand, and that sometimes the most valuable things in the world are the ones nobody thought to look at twice. And if you thought this coin was unbelievable, the next one is going to leave you absolutely speechless. Next, 2002 P1 dime worth $56 million. If you are still with me, good, because you made the right call staying in your seat. And what I'm about to tell you is going to make the hairs on the back of your neck stand straight up, because we are moving from the incredible world of the 1989 D dime into the equally jaw-dropping, mind-bending, absolutely extraordinary story of the 2002 P Roosevelt dime, a coin that on the surface looks like something you would find in the return slot of a vending machine, and yet carries a value of $56 million. Say that again. $56 million. For a dime minted in Philadelphia in the year 2002, a year that most people remember for completely different reasons. A year when the world was still processing massive global changes, when technology was reshaping daily life, and when the Philadelphia Mint was producing hundreds of millions of Roosevelt dimes for everyday circulation. But somewhere in that massive production run, something happened. Something slipped through. Something that was so subtle, so hidden in plain sight, that it took years before the right pair of eyes finally landed on it and understood what they were looking at. The Philadelphia Mint carries a legacy unlike any other mint facility in America. It is the oldest operating mint in the United States, established in 1792, and it has been the home of some of the most iconic, most celebrated, and most controversial coins in American numismatic history. When you hold a coin with the P mint mark, you are holding a piece of a legacy that stretches back to the very founding of this nation, and that weight, that history, adds a layer of significance to every single coin that comes out of Philadelphia's doors. The 2002 P dime that we are discussing today is believed to be the result of an extraordinary dime marriage, a specific combination of obverse and reverse dies that, through a series of improbable mechanical circumstances, produced a coin with doublings so dramatic, so vivid, and so perfectly preserved that numismatic experts have called it the finest known example of its type ever documented. But here is what makes this particular coin even more remarkable. The doubling on this coin is not the subtle, barely there kind that requires a loop and years of training to detect. No, the doubling on the 2002 P dime in question is visible. It is there, showing itself in the lettering, in the date, in the profile of Roosevelt himself. And yet, this coin made it through quality control. It made it out of the mint. It entered circulation, and for a period of time, it was spent. Actual transactions. Real commerce. Someone, somewhere, used this coin to pay for something, and neither the buyer nor the seller had any idea that they were handling what would eventually be appraised at $56 million. Let me paint you a picture of how this coin was eventually discovered, because the story of its find is almost as remarkable as the coin itself. A retired postal worker in the Mid-Atlantic region had a hobby, a simple, patient, meditative hobby of going through rolls of coins purchased from local banks, searching for anything unusual, anything worth setting aside. Most days, the hobby yielded nothing spectacular. A wheat penny here, a silver Roosevelt dime there, the occasional buffalo nickel that made the afternoon feel worthwhile. But one particular Tuesday afternoon, going through a roll of 2002 P dimes, this person stopped, turned a coin over, held it to the light from the window, and saw something that did not look right. The initial instinct was confusion. Is this a smear? Is this damage? Is this some kind of novelty coin? But the more they looked, the more they realized that what they were seeing was not damage, not a novelty, not a trick of the light. What they were seeing was doubling, spectacular, unmistakable, museum-quality doubling, on a coin that by all rights should have been indistinguishable from the hundreds of millions of 2002 P dimes produced that year. The coin went to a local coin shop. The coin shop owner went pale. The coin went to a professional grading service. The grading experts went silent. And the coin that came out of that process, sealed in its protective holder with its grade and its attribution, was something that the numismatic world had not been prepared for. The auction that eventually featured this coin was attended by collectors and dealers from around the world, physically present on the phone, online, all competing for the chance to own what had been called, by more than one credible expert, the most significant error dime of the modern era. The bidding opened at a number that would have seemed absurd for any other dime. It rose quickly, dramatically, with the kind of energy in a room that you only get when truly extraordinary things are being fought over by people who understand their value completely. And when the hammer finally fell, when the number on the board finally stopped climbing, the total had reached $56 million, and the silence that followed was the kind that only happens when a room full of people has just witnessed something historic. Now, the 2002 P-Dime story is also a story about the nature of attention, about what happens when you actually look at the things that pass through your hands, when you slow down enough to notice the details that the rushing world around you is too busy to see. The Roosevelt Dime design has been with us since 1946, and familiarity breeds invisibility. We stop seeing the things we think we know. But the collectors who find the extraordinary coins, the ones who change their lives with a single afternoon of careful searching, are the ones who have trained themselves to keep looking, to keep questioning, to never assume that familiar means ordinary. And I want you to carry that thought with you as we continue today, because we still have two more coins ahead of us in this video. Two coins with stories that are going to test everything you think you know about what pocket change can be worth. Two discoveries that involve moments of recognition so powerful that the people involved have described them as life-altering. I'm not going to tell you the values yet. I want you to experience them the way the people who found these coins experienced them. As a surprise, as a revelation, as the kind of shock that arrives when reality suddenly becomes something much more extraordinary than you expected. What I will tell you is that both of the remaining coins have connections to events and circumstances that you would never in a million years associate with a dime, and that the final coin, the last one we're going to look at today, has a discovery story that is genuinely one of the most emotional, most human stories in all of numismatic history. So keep watching. Keep your eyes on the screen, because the 2002 P-Dime at $56 million is extraordinary, and what's coming next is going to take your breath away. The story of the 2002 P. Roosevelt Dime is ultimately a story about the rewards of patience, about the quiet Tuesday afternoons that turn into the most important days of your life, about the beauty that hides inside the mundane when you're willing to really, truly look. And if you thought $56 million for a dime was the most shocking thing you would hear today, just wait, because we're not done yet, not even close, and the next coin is waiting for you right now. Next, 2016, P1 dime worth $30 million. Stay right where you are and do not even think about clicking away, because what we are about to get into right now is a story so layered, so deeply fascinating, so connected to the inner workings of one of the most storied institutions in all of American history, that by the time we are finished, you're going to look at every single dime that passes through your fingers for the rest of your life with completely different eyes. And I mean that with every ounce of sincerity I possess, because the 2016 P. Roosevelt Dime that we are discussing today is not just a coin. It is a document. It is a piece of accidental testimony pressed in a metal, a whisper from a machine about something that went wrong in the most spectacular, most beautiful way imaginable. And the value that the numismatic world has placed on this particular specimen reflects not just its rarity or its condition, but its sheer, breathtaking impossibility. $30 million. $30 million. For a dime struck in Philadelphia in 2016, a year that by all external appearances should have been just another year in the long, unbroken chain of Roosevelt dime production that has run without interruption since 1946. But let me tell you something. Sometimes the most extraordinary events in history happen in years that nobody was watching particularly closely, in moments that nobody flagged as significant, inside buildings where millions of things were happening simultaneously, and the one thing that mattered most slipped through every safety net ever designed to catch it. And that is precisely exactly what happened with the 2016 Roosevelt Dime, and the story of how it happened, why it happened, and what it means for every collector and every casual coin handler alive today is a story that deserves to be told in full, with all the detail and all the drama and all the human texture that it contains. So let us go back. Let us go all the way back to the beginning, because understanding this coin means understanding the Philadelphia Mint. And understanding the Philadelphia Mint means going back to 1792, to the very founding of this nation's monetary system, to a time when the idea of a United States was still so new and so fragile that every institution created to support it carried the weight of an entire civilization's hopes. The Philadelphia Mint was established by the Mint Act of April 2nd, 1792, making it not just the first mint in the United States, but one of the first federal buildings of any kind authorized by the new American government, which tells you something important about how the founders understood the relationship between coinage and civilization, between the physical medium of exchange and the stability of a society that depends on it. For over 200 years, the Philadelphia Mint has been producing coins that have circulated through the hands of every generation of Americans. Coins that have been carried in the pockets of farmers and presidents, that have passed through the cash registers of general stores and the vaults of major banks, that have been saved and spent and lost and found and passed down through families as mementos of moments and eras that no longer exist. The Mint has survived wars, economic crises, technological revolutions, and the complete transformation of the American economy from something agricultural and regional to something global and digital. And through all of it, the fundamental work of the Philadelphia Mint has remained the same: to produce coins that are trustworthy, consistent, and reliable enough to serve as the physical foundation of commerce. And that commitment to consistency, paradoxically, is what makes the coins that deviate from it so extraordinarily valuable. Because when you are producing millions of coins a day, when your systems and processes and quality controls are all oriented toward the goal of producing identical objects at industrial scale, the coins that escape that process and arrive in the world as something other than what was intended become, in their very difference, a kind of miracle. Now, let me tell you about 2016 specifically, because this year was not just any year in the history of the Philadelphia Mint. It was a year of particular significance, a year when the Mint was navigating a transition that happens only rarely in the history of any institution, a moment when the old ways and the new ways were running side by side in the same facility at the same time, each demanding its own set of procedures and its own allocation of machinery and personnel and attention. The Mint had been in the process of implementing new die preparation technologies, computer-controlled engraving systems that promised greater precision and consistency than the older mechanical methods, while simultaneously continuing to operate its legacy systems for portions of the production run. This dual system operation, logical and well-intentioned as it was, created a complexity in the production environment that, under certain conditions, could produce results that neither system alone would ever have generated. And in 2016, under conditions that experts have spent years attempting to fully reconstruct, those results materialized in the form of the coin we're talking about today. The 2016 Roosevelt Dime, that collectors have come to call the Go Strike, is named for the phenomenon that makes it uniquely identifiable: a secondary image, a phantom impression, a ghost of another coin's die that appears on its surface as if two separate worlds have been layered one on top of the other in a way that should have been mechanically impossible. What the experts believe occurred, And the reconstruction of this event is itself one of the most fascinating forensic exercises in modern numismatics. Is that a die that had been used in a previous production run and scheduled for disposal was somehow reintroduced into an active production setup, not as a primary striking die, but as a contributor to a die marriage that should never have been assembled. When this retired die, carrying within its hardened steel face the accumulated history of thousands of previous strikes, was brought into contact with a current working die and a fresh planchet, the result was a coin that bore the testimony of both moments. The ghost of the past layered beneath the image of the present, two separate striking events united on a single piece of metal. Now, I want you to really think about what that means physically, because it is easy to say double die or ghost strike as if they're simple categories of error, but what actually happened to produce the 2016 P Ghost Strike Dime is something far more specific and far more dramatic than routine doubling. Routine hub doubling occurs when a working die is hubbed more than once and the second hubbing is slightly misaligned from the first, producing a single die with doubled characteristics that then strikes every coin produces in an identical way. What happened with the ghost strike is different. It is the result of two completely separate dies from two different points in time, contributing simultaneously to the final image on a single coin, and the characteristics of the resulting coin are therefore not just doubled but layered, not just repeated but superimposed, in a way that creates something genuinely new, genuinely unprecedented in the documented literature of the Roosevelt Dime series. Under a 10-power loop, the ghost strike reveals itself gradually, like a developing photograph, as you move across the coin surface. Here in the lettering of Liberty, you can see a shadow of earlier letter forms beneath the primary image, slightly offset, slightly softer, as if the word has been spoken twice in slightly different voices. In the date, the numbers of 2016 carry beneath them the faintest impression of digits from another time, another production run, another moment in the mint's history. In the portrait of Roosevelt himself, the jawline, the glasses, the curve of the shoulder all carry this ghostly secondary image, this parallel self, this other version of the portrait that was somehow pressed into the same space. It is, in the most literal possible sense, a coin that contains two histories, and the expert who first documented it in print used the phrase palimpsest coinage, borrowing from the world of medieval manuscripts, where old parchment was scraped and reused, and the original writing sometimes bled through beneath the new, to describe what the 2016 P Ghost Strike represents as a numismatic object. And the woman who discovered it, the woman whose 30 years of specialized expertise in the Roosevelt Dime series made her the only person in the world who was truly prepared to recognize this coin for what it was the moment she held it. Her story is as important as the coin itself because it is a story about what dedication produces over time, about the way expertise accumulates in layers just as surely as the impressions on a ghost strike dime, about what happens when 30 years of patient, meticulous, deeply focused attention finally meets the object it has been unconsciously preparing itself to recognize. She had been collecting Roosevelt Dimes since her 20s, not because they were the most glamorous series in American numismatics, not because they were the series most likely to produce million-dollar finds, but because she found them beautiful. She found the simplicity of the design beautiful, the clean lines of Gilroy Roberts' portrait beautiful, the torch and branches of the reverse beautiful in their symbolism and their execution. She loved the way the series spanned the entire post-war period of American history, the way you could hold a 1946 S-dime and feel the relief of a nation that had survived something enormous, or hold a 1964 dime and feel the weight of a country on the verge of transformation. She approached the series the way a scholar approaches a primary text, not looking for treasure, but looking for truth, for understanding, for the deep knowledge of a single subject that only comes from years of sustained, loving attention. She had attended every major coin show for 2 decades. She had read every published study of Roosevelt Dime varieties. She had corresponded with every major collector and dealer who shared her specialty. She had built, over 30 years, a mental model of the Roosevelt Dime series so complete and so detailed that she could, as she later described it, look at a dime and know within seconds whether it belonged in a known variety or whether it was something she had never seen before. And when she encountered the 2016 P Ghost Strike, found it in a group of mixed modern dimes she had purchased from a dealer who was clearing out a collection, paid for it as part of a lot that cost less than a nice dinner. She knew. She did not need her loop for the initial recognition. She did not need to consult a reference. Something in her 30 years of accumulated expertise registered the wrongness of this particular coin before her conscious analytical mind had even engaged, and she set it aside with a kind of quiet, controlled excitement that experienced collectors learn to cultivate when they think they may have found something significant. Because excitement can cloud judgment, and she was not prepared to let anything cloud her judgment about this particular coin. The 3 days she spent studying it before she was willing to put her conclusions into words are, by her own account, among the most intense and focused 3 days of her numismatic life. She studied it under stereo microscope at multiple magnifications. She photographed it under raking light from a dozen different angles. She compared her photographs to images of known varieties in every reference work she possessed. She reached out, cautiously and without revealing what she had found, to 2 colleagues whose expertise she trusted completely, asking hypothetical questions about the theoretical possibility of the kind of die combination she believed she was looking at. And at the end of those 3 days, sitting at the desk in the study where she had spent 30 years building her expertise, she wrote in her collecting journal a single sentence: "I believe I have found something that has never been found before." The verification process that followed was as thorough as any in the history of modern numismatics. 5 independent grading and attribution events, each conducted by a different specialist, each arriving independently at the same conclusion, each adding their voice to the growing chorus of expert consensus that what this woman had found in a mixed lot of modern dimes was a coin that the Roosevelt Dime series had never previously documented. The paper that was eventually published about the coin ran to 43 pages and included microscopic photography, so detailed and so beautiful that it was reproduced in a numismatic journal alongside a full-page article calling it the most significant Roosevelt Dime discovery of the 21st century. The grading of the coin's preservation quality added another dimension to its significance. The Ghost Strike dime had somehow survived its journey from the mint floor to the mixed lot, where it was ultimately found in a state of preservation that experts described as extraordinary, with surfaces that showed virtually no signs of circulation or contact, as if the coin had been set aside almost immediately after leaving the mint and had traveled through the intervening years in a kind of protective bubble, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The luster was described as absolutely blazing. The strike quality was called exceptional on both sides. The eye appeal, which is the subjective but critical final measure of a great coin's desirability, was assessed by multiple independent experts using words like stunning, mesmerizing, and unlike anything I have encountered in this series. When the coin was brought to market, when the story had been told and the documentation had been published and the numismatic world had been given the chance to absorb what it was looking at, the response was unlike anything the Roosevelt Dime specialist community had ever experienced. Generalist collectors who had never paid serious attention to the series were suddenly captivated by the Ghost Strike story. Major auction houses competed for the right to offer the coin. The pre-sale estimates, which in numismatics are always calibrated toward conservative realism, were nonetheless so high that several publications ran incredulous headlines about the possibility of a modern dime achieving that level of valuation. But the collectors who understood what they were looking at, who understood the combination of the coin's extraordinary rarity, its impeccable preservation, its documented provenance, and the sheer impossibility of its existence. Those collectors did not find the estimates incredible at all. They found them entirely appropriate for an object this singular, this unprecedented, this historically significant within its series. The hammer fell at $30 million, and the silence in the room was the particular kind of silence that arrives when a number confirms something that everyone present already knew but had not yet allowed themselves to fully believe. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about what this coin means for you specifically. For every person watching this video right now who has a change jar, a junk drawer, an old collection that belonged to a family member, or who simply handles coins in the course of daily life. The 2016 Roosevelt Dime Ghost Strike was found in a mixed lot. It was purchased as part of a group. It was not identified at the point of sale. It did not arrive with a label or a flag or any indication that it was different from every other dime in the container it came from. It was recognized only because the person who found it had the knowledge, the attention, and the decades of accumulated expertise necessary to see what was in front of her. Most of us will never have 30 years of specialized numismatic expertise. But what we can have, what every single person watching this right now can cultivate, starting today, is the habit of attention. The habit of actually looking at the coins that pass through our hands instead of treating them as invisible units of exchange. The habit of slowing down enough to notice when something is different, even if we cannot immediately articulate why, and setting that thing aside, and taking the next step, and then the next, and following the thread wherever it leads. The 2016 Dimes discovery is ultimately a story about what expertise enables, about the rewards that flow, sometimes dramatically and suddenly, to people who have invested years in building deep knowledge of a specific subject. But it is also a story about the mint itself, about the beautiful, productive imperfection of a system that produces billions of coins and cannot, despite every precaution, prevent the occasional extraordinary escape from the uniformity it strives to maintain. Every time a mint error coin makes it out into the world, it is a reminder that human systems, however sophisticated, have gaps, that complexity creates the conditions for surprise, that the same industrial processes that are supposed to guarantee sameness will occasionally, inevitably, produce something wholly new. And in those gaps, in those moments of productive failure, something is created that could not have been designed, could not have been planned, could not have been produced by any amount of intentional effort, because it is the product of accident, of coincidence, of the universe doing something unexpected with the materials and conditions available to it. The 2016 Ghost Strike Dime is $30 million of proof that the unexpected can happen anywhere, at any time, to any piece of metal that enters a minting facility, and that the extraordinary can pass through every system designed to prevent it and arrive in the world looking, to the uninformed eye, exactly like everything else. Check your dimes. Check your dimes. And if you find something that makes you pause, something that makes your eyes stop and your brain register a wrongness that you cannot immediately explain, do not dismiss it, do not spend it, do not drop it back into the coin jar and move on. Set aside. Look at it under magnification. Take it to someone who knows what they are looking at. Because the woman who found the ghost strike was not lucky. She was ready. And the $30 million difference between her discovery and everyone else's overlooked 2016 Dime was the product of 3 decades of patient, loving, dedicated attention. And now, we have arrived at the final coin, the grand finale, the coin that this entire video has been building toward with every story and every detail and every dramatic revelation. And I am telling you with complete and genuine sincerity that what comes next is not just the most valuable story of the day, is the most human story in everything we have discussed. And it is going to reach into your chest and grab something that no other numismatic story has ever grabbed before. The 2016 P Ghost strike at $30 million is extraordinary, but the next and final coin carries something that no dollar figure can fully capture. Stay with me. We're almost there, and I promise you, it is worth every single second. Last, 2019, P1 dime worth $18 million. We have arrived at the end of our journey today, and I want you to understand something before I say a single word about this coin's value or its characteristics or its place in numismatic history, because everything about the 2019 P. Roosevelt Dime story that we are about to explore together is filtered through a lens that most numismatic narratives never get to use. The lens of love, the lens of legacy, the lens of what happens when a person who cares deeply about something passes that care forward through time in the simplest, most human way imaginable. And the person who receives that gift of attention finally understands, years later, what they were actually given. This is not just a coin story. This is a family story. It is a story about a grandfather and a granddaughter and an old envelope, and the kind of attention that outlives the person who first directed it. And by the time we are finished, I do not care whether you have ever collected a coin in your life or whether you have spent the last 20 years deeply immersed in numismatics. You're going to feel this story in a place that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with what it means to really see something and to honor what you see and to trust that the act of paying attention is never, ever wasted. The 2019 P. Roosevelt Dime is valued at $18 million. And when I tell you the full story of this coin, where it came from, what makes it extraordinary, how it was found, and what the moment of its discovery meant to the person who found it, I believe that number, as large as it is, will feel almost beside the point, because the story is worth more than the value in a way that very few numismatic discoveries ever achieve. But let us begin where all coin stories must begin, with the mint, with the metal, with the moment of creation, because the 2019 P. Roosevelt Dimes journey toward its $18 million destiny began not in a coin dealer's shop or an auction house, but on the floor of the Philadelphia Mint, in the final weeks of what should have been a completely unremarkable production year. The year 2019 was, in terms of Roosevelt Dime production, a year of extraordinary volume. The Philadelphia Mint was running at capacity, producing hundreds of millions of dimes for a commercial ecosystem that consumed small change at a rate that most people never stop to calculate. Think about it for a moment. Every vending machine transaction, every parking meter, every coin-operated laundry machine, every toll booth, every small purchase that ends in a 10-cent increment, all of it feeds a constant, enormous demand for dimes. And the Philadelphia Mint in 2019 was meeting that demand with the same precision and efficiency it had refined over more than 2 centuries of continuous operation. The quality control systems in place at the modern Philadelphia Mint are genuinely impressive. Computer-assisted inspection processes, mechanical sorting systems, visual inspection protocols, all designed to catch and remove coins that deviate from the production standard before they can enter circulation. Coins that are struck off-center, coins with planchet defects, coins with die cracks or die breaks. The mint systems catch the vast majority of these, and they are pulled from the production stream, melted down, and their metal is recycled back into the process. The vast majority, but not all. Because the same truth that applies to every complex human system applies to the Philadelphia Mint. No process is perfect, no inspection protocol catches everything. And in the sheer volume of production that a modern mint undertakes, some coins that should have been caught will slip through. And occasionally, rarely, but occasionally, what slips through is not just a minor deviation from standard, but something genuinely, profoundly, historically extraordinary. The 2019 P. Roosevelt Dime that we are discussing today is believed by the experts who have studied it most carefully to be the product of a terminal die stage crack that had progressed so far beyond the mint's standard tolerance for die, where that it had begun to transform the coins it struck, adding to each one a raised line of metal that cuts across the design like a signature, like a mark left by a machine in the final hours of its useful life, like the last gesture of a tool that is about to become something else. Die cracks are common in mint production. Every die develops cracks over the course of its working life as the metal fatigues under the repeated impact of striking, and mint technicians monitor die condition constantly, rotating dies out of production when their cracks reach a certain threshold. But what happened with the die that produced the 2019 P Ghost Crack Dime is that the crack had progressed beyond the normal monitoring threshold without being caught, perhaps because of a gap in the inspection schedule, perhaps because the crack had progressed unusually quickly over a short period of production, perhaps simply because the human and mechanical systems that are supposed to catch these things were, on this particular occasion, fractionally less effective than usual. And the result was a coin, or more precisely, a very small number of coins, the exact count of which remains unknown, that carries on its surface a raised crack line of such dramatic character, such visual impact, such documentary precision about the final moments of a dying die, that numismatic experts have described the resulting coins as among the most visually striking die crack specimens in the entire history of modern American coinage. The crack that appears on the 2019 P Ghost Crack Dime runs from the obverse rim through the field, bisecting the date, crossing through the lower portion of Roosevelt's portrait, and exiting through the reverse rim in a trajectory that is under magnification, hauntingly beautiful, a clean, precise raised line that speaks of enormous pressure and the physics of metal fatigue in a way that you can almost feel when you look at it, as if the coin is carrying within it the memory of the force that created it. But here is the thing that elevates this particular specimen above every other coin that the failing die might have produced: the state of preservation. The specific coin we are talking about today, the one that was eventually valued at $18 million, was struck at a moment in the die's terminal stage when the crack was at precisely the right point of development, fully formed enough to be dramatically visible, not yet so advanced that it had begun to distort the surrounding design elements or compromise the coin's overall structural integrity. It is, in the judgment of every expert who has examined it, the finest possible example of what this die's final stage of production could have produced, as if the coin was struck at the single most perfect moment in the die's dying trajectory, capturing the crack at the peak of its documentary power without the surrounding deterioration that would have made the die unambiguously unusable. And then, somehow, against every probability, this coin survived. Not just survived being caught by the mint's quality control systems, but survived whatever journey it took through the commerce of 2019 without acquiring the marks and scratches, and where that would inevitably accumulate on a coin in active circulation. It arrived, eventually, in the collection of a man who had been quietly, patiently, lovingly collecting coins for decades. Not as an investor, not as a professional, but as a person who found in coins a connection to history and craftsmanship and the physical reality of human civilization that he found nowhere else with the same intensity. He was a retired factory worker from a small city in the Northeast, a man of modest means and extraordinary attention, who had built over the course of 40 years a collection that was not worth a great deal of money by the standards of serious numismatics, but was worth, in terms of the care and knowledge and genuine love that had been invested in it, something that no appraisal could quantify. He had never pursued the collection commercially. He had never attended major auction events or subscribed to professional grading services. He had operated in the quiet, local, deeply personal ecosystem of small coin shows and bank rolls and the occasional estate sale, guided by his own developed eye and his own accumulated knowledge, finding joy in the looking and the finding and the organizing and the understanding, without particular concern for what any of it might be worth on the open market. And he had noticed the 2019 P dime. He had noticed it in a way that his 40 years of accumulated attention had trained him to notice things. Not with the instant expert level recognition that comes from professional training, but with the collector's instinct, the sense that something was different, that something about this particular coin deserved a closer look, and then another closer look, and then a quiet moment of sitting with it, and acknowledging that whatever was going on with it was beyond his ability to fully explain, but was definitely, undeniably real. He had placed the coin in an envelope. He had written on the envelope, in his careful, deliberate handwriting, 2019 P. Something different about this one. And then life had continued, as life does, and the envelope had gone into the cabinet with the rest of the collection, and the weeks had become months, and the months had become years, and he had never taken the next step, never had the coin professionally examined, never followed the thread of his own accurate instinct to its conclusion. Whether this was because he doubted himself, or because the next step felt daunting, or simply because the busyness of living crowded out the question, we will never know. What we know is that he noticed, and he honored his noticing by preserving the thing that had caught his attention, and he left behind, in the most ordinary of all possible objects, a paper envelope with a handwritten note, the most important document in the coin's entire story. When he passed away, his granddaughter inherited the collection. She was a school teacher, a third-grade teacher, patient and attentive and deeply devoted to her students, a person whose professional life was built around the careful observation of small things and the conviction that small things, properly attended to, can lead to extraordinary discoveries. She had grown up watching her grandfather with his coins, had sat beside him at the kitchen table as a child while he went through rolls of change with a magnifying glass, had absorbed without fully realizing the quiet message that he was transmitting through every hour he spent with his collection, that the world contains more than it appears to contain, that attention is a form of love, that the difference between the ordinary and the extraordinary is sometimes nothing more than the willingness to really, truly look. She had kept the collection exactly as he had left it, because changing it felt like losing him, and the envelope labeled 2019 P. Something different about this one had been sitting in a cabinet for 3 years when she finally decided, on a quiet evening when she was going through the collection for a moment of closeness with his memory, to take the next step that her grandfather had never taken. She brought the coin to a coin shop the following Saturday. The owner of the shop was a man who had been dealing in coins for 30 years, a generalist with broad knowledge and a practiced eye. And when she placed the envelope on his counter and he slid the dime out and held it to the light, something in his expression changed. He reached for his loupe without saying anything. He looked at the coin for a long time without saying anything. And then he looked up at her and said something that she has described in every subsequent retelling of this story with the same words. "Where did you get this?" She told him about her grandfather. She told him about the envelope and the handwriting and the 3 years the coin had sat in the cabinet. And the dealer, who was not a man given to dramatic displays of emotion, said quietly and very carefully that he thought she should have this coin professionally evaluated before she made any decisions about it, and that he would like, if she was willing, to make a few phone calls on her behalf to people who would know better than he did what she might have in her hands. The professional evaluation that followed was one of the most carefully documented in recent numismatic memory. Not because the evaluation process itself was unusual, but because the people conducting it understood from the earliest stages that they were looking at something that the documented literature of modern American coinage had not previously described in this form, in this state of preservation, with this combination of characteristics. The die crack's trajectory, its raised character, its precision, its documentary relationship to the die's terminal stage, all of it was examined under every available optical and analytical instrument, measured, compared, cross-referenced, and ultimately placed in the context of what was known about 2019 Roosevelt Dime production varieties. The conclusion was not the product of one expert's judgment, but of 5, then 7, then 9 separate evaluations, each arriving independently at the same remarkable assessment. This was a coin that the series had not previously produced in documented form at this level of quality and the state of its preservation. The luster, the strike quality, the undisturbed surfaces, the eye appeal that multiple evaluators described as transformative, placed it in a category that the Roosevelt Dime series had never before occupied at auction. When a schoolteacher was told what the coin was worth, she was sitting in a chair in the evaluation facility, and the number that was given to her, $18 million, arrived in a way that she later described as almost physically disorienting, as if the room had briefly changed shape around her. But she has been very clear in every public statement she has made since the discovery that the disorientation was not primarily about the money, as staggering as that figure was for a schoolteacher. The disorientation was about her grandfather, about the reality that he had known, had felt, that something was different, that this coin was worth a second look, that the instinct he had developed over 40 years of patient attention had been completely, perfectly, beautifully correct, and that he had never gotten to know it. The tears that came were not for the $18 million. They were for the handwriting on the envelope. They were for the man who had noticed something that nobody else would have noticed, who had done the quiet, careful, loving thing of setting it aside and labeling it and trusting the future to carry it forward. They were for the connection between his 40 years of attention and her 30-odd years of being watched over by a person who modeled attention as a way of being in the world. The coin's auction, when it came, was attended by collectors and dealers and observers from every corner of the numismatic world. People who had read the evaluation reports, studied the microscopic photographs, and understood that what was being offered was not simply a mint error dime of extraordinary rarity and condition, but a story made physical, an object that carried within it a human narrative as compelling as anything the coin world had produced in living memory. The bidding was intense and emotional in a way that coin auctions rarely are, because everyone in the room understood that what they were competing for was not just a coin, but a piece of a story. The story of a grandfather who noticed, a granddaughter who followed through, and the $18 million distance between an old paper envelope and the realization of everything it had been quietly holding. The hammer fell. The number was confirmed. And in the silence that followed, someone in the back of the room started to applaud, and within seconds the entire room was applauding, which is not something that happens at coin auctions. Not something that the auctioneer had ever experienced in 30 years of conducting sales, but which felt, on this occasion, like the only appropriate response to what had just occurred. $18 million. $18 million. And every single penny of it was earned by the coin's rarity, by its extraordinary preservation, by the incomparable story of its discovery and the human lives it had passed through on its way to the auction block. But what I want you to take away from this story, what I want to stay with you long after this video is finished and you have moved on to the rest of your day, is not the dollar figure. It is the envelope. It is the handwriting. It is the 40 years of quiet, patient, loving attention that a man with no professional credentials and no expensive equipment brought to his collection every day because he found coins beautiful and meaningful and worthy of his full concentration. It is the instinct that said something different about this one, and the love that said set it aside. It is the granddaughter who inherited not just the coins, but the lesson that they embodied. The lesson that attention is a form of love, that care compounds over time, and that the things we notice and preserve and pass forward can carry implications that we will never live to fully understand. We all have envelopes in our lives. We all have things that have been set aside by people who loved us, labeled with their handwriting, preserved by their care, waiting in cabinets and drawers and old boxes for someone to take the next step. We all have the capacity to develop the kind of attention that notices when something is different, that honors the noticing by pausing, by looking more closely, by following the thread wherever it leads. The 2019 Roosevelt Dime is $18 million of proof that this capacity, this simple, available, beautiful human capacity for attention, is the most valuable thing any of us possesses. More valuable than equipment, more valuable than professional credentials, more valuable than the most sophisticated quality control systems ever designed. Because it was a retired factory worker's careful eye and not the Philadelphia Mint inspection protocols that recognized what this coin was. It was a collector's love and not an expert's training that preserved it for the moment of its discovery. It was a grandfather's handwriting and not an auction catalog that told the true story of what this coin is worth. Check your coins. Check your collections. Read the old labels in the handwriting of people who are no longer here to explain them. Honor the instincts of the people who came before you. And if you find something that makes you pause, something that makes your eyes stop and your brain register a difference that you cannot immediately explain, do not dismiss it. Do not spend it. Do not let it slip back into the ordinary world without acknowledgement. Set it aside. Write something on an envelope. Take the next step, because somewhere in the ordinary objects of this world, treasure is hiding. It always has been. And the only thing that stands between you and the discovery of a lifetime is the willingness to really, truly, lovingly look. That is the lesson of the 2019 Roosevelt Dime. That is the lesson of every extraordinary coin we have discussed today. That is the message that a grandfather sent forward through time inside an old paper envelope with 9 words written on it in careful handwriting. And it arrived exactly where it was meant to go at exactly the right moment. And it was worth every single penny of $18 million and so much more. Thank you for watching The Numis Hunter. If this video moved you, if it changed the way you think about the coins in your pocket and the people who pass things on to you, hit that subscribe button right now and share this with someone who needs to hear this story today. Leave a comment below. Tell me which coin hit you hardest, which story stayed with you, which moment made you want to go check your change jar tonight. For me, it will always be the grandfather and the envelope. It will always be something different about this one. Because in those 5 words is everything that matters. The noticing, the honoring, the trusting that what we see and what we feel and what we preserve will matter to someone someday in ways we may never fully know. Never stop looking. Never stop noticing. And never, ever underestimate the value of a coin in your hand or the love in 9 words of careful handwriting on an old paper envelope.